You might wonder why I'm standing next to a rather old and sad decrepit tree in Maxwell Arboretum on campus with a label that says Chanticleer pear. The reason for that is Chanticleer is one of the cultivars of callery pear, the straight species, and callery pears have a very interesting and checkered history, and it's getting even more interesting as we look at what is happening with the species. Callery pears were imported into the United States in the early 1900s to be able to help mitigate some of the huge issues with fire blight. Fire blight, which is a disease that we talk about a lot in members of the rose family, was devastating the actual fruiting pears in this country and really wreaking havoc. Callery pear as a species has greater resistance. So to be able to do the breeding and do that crossing of the fruiting pears, which is a different species, with callery, which is more ornamental, built in some fire blight resistance. In the 1950s, what happened is people were looking at all of the different breeding that had been going on. All of a sudden we have different genotypes appearing from different populations, and saw some pretty significant ornamental qualities in callery pear. That would include beautiful early spring flowers. They flower before the fruit occurs, and a tendency toward great fall color. So here came one of the very first cultivars of callery pear, which was the Bradford pear. It was used extensively across the country. Uniform, upright, dense canopy, glossy foliage, disease and insect resistant, great flowering, essentially no fruit, because callery pears, including that original Bradford, are pears that cannot self-pollinate. So it was essentially sterile for all intents and purposes in the landscape. Here came additional genotypes, additional breeding, and of course with grafting on the rootstock, which is where Bradford originated, it's grafted onto a rootstock. On occasion, what happens is you get damage to the tree itself, and here comes the rootstock, which is straight callery pear. So all of a sudden, instead of something that is not self-pollinating, we had two things that could cross and of course then create fruit, and the fruit, instead of being sterile, could become small little seedlings in the landscape. Didn't seem to be much of a problem. Now we have over half the states in the Union that have great concern about the invasive qualities of our callery pear. And what happens with it is the fruits that are produced are relished by the birds, and then of course transplanted by those birds, and they become these colonies of essentially different callery type pears. The original calleries also can come up with thorns. They're extremely fast growing. They are very difficult to control because if you mow them off, what happens is they actually will come back up from the roots again. The birds continue to spread them. The distance for flying pollinators is about 300 feet. So if you have something that is a different genotype within about 300 feet of another pear, you could end up with seedlings. So we're finding populations even in Lincoln, Nebraska that have spread and become these significant colonies with a fast growth rate. Beware of planting pear. Don't use it as a street tree. Don't use it in your landscape. Choose instead one of our other wonderful early spring flowering plants that so far does not want to threaten to take over the earth.